Thank you for joining us for our May 2023 Q&A talk. I'm tonight's host, Q&A Talks Program Coordinator Cody McRae-Cullum. My personal pronouns are he, him, but if you're feeling bold, feel free to address me with my preferred pronoun, the royal we. I am so excited to be speaking tonight with Tajahnaé Stocker. Q&A Talks connects rural parents and caregivers of LGBTQIA+ youth with the resources they need to ensure their children can grow up safe and authentically. Q&A Talks is an initiative of Project Q&A and is made possible by grants from the Independence Area Community Chest and the American Library Association's Libraries Transform Communities Focus on Rural and Small Library Grant in partnership with the Independence Public Library. Tonight we are pleased to have Tajahnaé Stocker. Tajahnaé is an agender community organizer, writer, and policy advocate based in Wichita, Kansas. Using a Black feminist and class solidarity lens, Tajahnaé aims to dismantle all forms of racial and wealth injustice and fight to the liberation of all people through centering lived and living experience. Please welcome Tajahnaé.
Hello. I am so happy to be here. I'm so happy to be speaking with advocates and allies and parents and everybody in between, because I think it's really important that we ground ourselves in this type of education. So we are there to advocate for our marginalized community, especially our marginalized youth. And so any tools that can be learned, I am happy to share. And I'm really excited to be sharing with you today. So let's get started. I'm going to share my screen.
Absolutely, yeah.
This is one of my favorite presentations to do because the legislative session can be really, really tricky. And sometimes it's tricky on purpose to kind of keep marginalized people out of the conversation and out of these kind of things that keep these oppressive systems that keep us down. So this is my favorite thing to do. It kind of we're going to be breaking down the legislative session, how to advocate effectively, how to navigate the Kansas legislature website, which can be really, really tricky as well, and the ins and outs of conversations that you should be having during session, which is typically January through April, and conversations that you should be having outside of legislative session, and that's where we are now. Because just because we elect people into office, it doesn't mean that they stop working once legislative session ends. We should be holding them accountable 365 days of the year. So I'm excited to go through this presentation and kind of share what I have learned in a way that can empower others to be involved in this process. So this is our agenda. We're going to be starting with the basics, which is the website. That's really, really step one. That's where you find your bills, your committees. That's where you find your legislator, where their rooms are, all the information you need to kind of advocate and connect with them. Then we're going to transition into advocating effectively. How do you talk to your legislator? It can be intimidating because they are people who hold power in the state of Kansas, but I promise you they're just like regular people. So it's going to be really, really impactful to know how to talk to them and how to build a relationship with them. Then we're going to dive into writing testimony, which is going to be really, really important. That's how we share our stories, our narratives, and that's how we kind of educate the Kansas legislature on what's actually happening, because sometimes they just don't know. And then lastly, it says Kansas Appleseed. It's not Kansas Appleseed. There's some amazing organizations across Kansas that do LGBTQ work. And we're going to share a little bit about them and how you can get involved with that kind of work. So a little bit about me. My name is Tajahnaé Stocker. I'm 26 years old, and I'm a policy advocate at Kansas Appleseed. I originally did anti-hunger, and now I'm transitioning into youth justice, which is going to be really, really exciting. I've been doing anti-hunger since 2019, and so youth justice is going to be brand new to me, but I'm excited to be an advocate for the youth and learn a lot from them. I'm a graduate from Wichita State. I have family roots in Mexico, Alabama, and Oklahoma. I was born in California, but I was raised in Wichita, Kansas. I created the ICT Community Fridge Project, which is based in Wichita, and I also help other community fridges get their start if they need it. I identify as a Black agender person. My pronouns are they, them. And I also identify as an impacted Kansan, meaning that I have been impacted by systems of oppression. So, as a queer person, that's just that. There's, as we know, there's just been a large attack on the LGBTQ community, specifically the trans community. And so that has been impactful and it's pretty stressful for me. Outside of that, I've been impacted by like wealth inequality. So my family has been on SNAP, EBT, Section 8, TANF, WIC, kind of the social safety net programs that a lot of Kansans benefit from. I've also been impacted by the criminal justice system, specifically fines and fees. I've had my driver's license suspended because I couldn't afford to pay a court fine. So that's a pretty big limitation. And so I use that experience as my expertise while navigating these systems as a policy advocate. I use my lived experience a lot when it comes to meeting with legislatures or empowering other impacted people, because I know that my personal story is really, really powerful when it comes to building reflective policies. And so this is why it's my favorite thing to do. So we're going to start with the basics. The first thing you want to know is who represents you. And the easiest way to do this is to go to openstates.org, and that's how you find your state reps and your state senators, and it's also how you find your federal representatives and your federal senators. And so I love Open States, very easy to do. You just type in your address and it tells you your district and it tells you the names of everybody. And so for my senator, I'm in District 25, and that's Senator Mary Ware. For my representative, I'm District 103, and that's Angela Martinez. And so now I know who's representing me. Now I can hold them accountable, and now I know how to navigate the Kansas legislature website because I know who is representing me. So Open States is going to be really, really helpful for the beginning. If you already know who they are, if you already have a good relationship with them, perfect. Skip this step. Once you know who represents you, now we can take it to the Kansas legislature. And so this is the website. This is what the front page looks like. It'll tell you at the top what session year that we're in. And so we recently just ended the 23 to 24 legislative session. It'll also tell you when the session is back in session. And so when you go on the website, it'll say session will resume, I think January 8th, 2024. So now you know that when January 8th hits, that's when you need to be paying attention. So right now they're currently on break until January 8th. It'll tell you who's in session. It'll tell you where you can watch the audio and video broadcast. And then on the left side, it's where you can find your bill, find your legislator, and find your legislative dates, and also a bunch of other resources. And then we have different tabs for the committees and the laws and the journals. And looking at this, it could be really, really overwhelming, which is why I'm excited to break it down. So on the left, if you have your bill numbers usually start with HB or SB. So HB for House Bill, SB for Senate Bill, and then it'll have a number. And once you have that bill number, you have everything. All the information about the bill is going to be on there. All the information about who sponsored it, the committee that it's in, it's all going to be there. And so that's why it's beneficial to know who your legislator is too, because they're most likely going to be talking about it, or they sponsored it, or they're in a committee that's talking about it. Getting to know your legislature. So if you don't know anything about them, the only thing you know is their name, you can go back to the left, you can go to find your legislature and type in their name, and it'll have every piece of information about them, which is really, really interesting and really funny because it literally has everything about them. So you can look up information on individual legislators, including their contact info, their office number, their home address, their committee assignments, and their district maps. And so when it is legislative session, so when January does hit, you're going to want to be using that Capitol office phone number and email, because that's where they're going to be most of the time. Since we're at a session, you can use their home information. So sometimes they'll have their phone number up there. Sometimes they don't. I know that my senator has her email up there. So that's what I'm going to use to contact her during this long break. So we can see that Senator Mary Ware has some committee leadership positions, and that's going to be really, really beneficial depending on which committees that you're watching. And so if there's a specific bill in agriculture and natural resources, so this one right here, if there's a bill that I'm watching in that committee, and I know that my senator has a leadership position in that committee, this is the perfect time to start building that relationship with them because they have power in that specific committee. And so that's why it's important to know who is your legislature and where they at, because they might have some power, and even if they don't have power, it's still really, really impactful to build that relationship with them. You can also see what committees they are on, you can see the time, the room, if you want to go watch, because you can go watch. You can see all the sponsored bills and resolutions that they were sponsoring throughout the year. And so it has literally everything, so you can keep track and hold your legislative official accountable. Committees. I've been talking a lot about committees. They're pretty important. You can find all the legislative committees under the committee tab. So on that first welcome page, if you just click that tab, and then your standing committees are going to be the most relevant. So that's the ones that we're usually watching. You can see that some of them in the House and Senate are pretty similar, pretty not. But this is where you can follow where your bill is going. And so if you are focusing on an LGBTQ bill, if you're focusing on a corrections and juvenile bill, if you're focused on an education bill, those are the committees that you want to be watching. And those are the legislators that you want to be paying attention to, because they have the power of voting on those. And it's important to know your bill number, because your bill number will tell you which committee they're in, and that's how you can pay attention. And if you can't make it to Topeka, if you don't live in Topeka, you can watch online on YouTube. They live stream all of them. If you want to see the ones from this past legislative session, or even like last year, you can watch. They're all there. If you want to keep up with everything, or again, you can go to Topeka and you can sit in the room. Committee pages. So if you want to know where your legislator lies, or if you're just curious of who's in the committee, you can go, you click on, so for example, I want to know who's in the education one. So I'll click on education and this page will pop up and it'll tell me all your representatives. Do you see a representative? I don't see Mary Ware in here. And so I don't have to press her on those issues because she's not in this committee. But it would still be beneficial to know who is in here, what districts they do represent. And so individual committee pages tell you committee members, membership, leadership, staff, and what bills are still in that committee. And it'll tell you all the bills that they are talking about. So it makes it really, really helpful to watch them. And again, here's the staff, committee assistants, if you need to contact anyone. And here is going to be the leadership. So we have Vice Chair Adam Thomas. If that's your legislator, feel free to contact him on anything that has to do with education. Ranking minority member is going to be Representative Jerry. If that's your representative, you can contact them on anything that has to do with education. This is the legislative calendar. It's also, this is for this year. I don't really know what next year is going to look like, but the legislative session convened on the first day of 2023 at 2 p.m. and that was on January 9th. Again, I think next year is going to be January 8th. And we anticipated a 90-day session, but anything can happen. It could be really, really fluid. And these are kind of the important dates, but really we are here, sine die, and that's the end of the session. And so we're done vetoing, we're done voting, and we won't be in session until January 8th again. And so these are some of the important dates if you are interested, but again, it's sine die. I do have bills becoming a law. I showed this to some college students and some of them had no idea what this was, and it made me feel very, very old. But it's really, I think it's really impactful. It's just the basic way of how a bill becomes a law. So we're just going to watch that. Well, now I'm stuck in committing out this directly. Pretty simple, but sometimes it's not. But so the bill is sponsored. It's either sponsored or it's by the people, or it's sponsored by a committee, either in the House or the Senate. Then the bill gets sent to the committee, and the committee holds a public hearing, and that's the live stream portion that you can watch on YouTube. You can watch them go back and forth. It's not as wild. I don't know what it is like in DC. I don't know if there's like a whole lot of yelling, but all the hearings I've heard have been pretty tame, unless it's like a really, really controversial bill. And the powerful thing about that is Kansans can come in and testify on that bill. They have public hearings, and people can come and say that they are a proponent of a bill, they're neutral on the bill, or they oppose the bill. The committee then works the bill after the hearings, so they can amend it. They could say, I like it, but we need to tweak this. They vote it out, or it dies. The bill is worked by the chamber of its origin. So if it started in the House, it's going to be worked by the House. It might be amended, and it might be passed, or it might be defeated. If it passes, it's going to go to the other chamber, and it gets assigned to the committee. As we saw that the House and Senate has similar names for committees. Some of them are the same, some of them have different names. That's why it's really, really important to follow where that bill is going, because once it leaves the House and goes to the Senate, it might have a different number. And then the committee process repeats again, the chamber process repeats, and then the bill is sent to and signed by the governor in a perfect world. But the world is not perfect. So sometimes it's more complicated, and this is where conference committees come in. So if a bill passes in one chamber, but it is changed and then passed by the other, a conference committee is appointed with 6 members. And so 3 from the House, 3 from the Senate. The conference committee agrees to the changes, and both chambers vote on the conference committee report. It can be debated, but it cannot be amended. And then the conference committee compromise goes to the governor for a signature. Sounds pretty simple, but sometimes it's not. Conference committees can be used to bundle or change bills, which can be really, really impactful or really, really dangerous. If the content of a bill has passed one chamber, it could be put into a conference committee, again, with 3 from the House and 3 from the Senate. Conference committee bundling can help meaningful legislation get across the finish line. It can also be used to squash amendments, or package bad bills with good ones to sneak them through. There are times where like one bill is passed, but they can gut the content of that bill and replace it with something different. And because it passed, all that stuff that has replaced it can be passed, which I learned is a gut and go. And at times, again, it can be really, really beneficial, but it can be really, really scary when a good bill passes and they scoop the contents of a good bill out and they put something bad in it just to pass it, which makes this really complicated. And again, it can get even more complicated. And so if the governor vetoes a bill, if the governor is like, I don't like this, I'm not going to sign it into law, a motion to override can be made within 30 days of the veto. So, and the veto happens if 2/3 of both chambers vote to override, then the bill becomes a law without the signature of a governor. So if they're able to override it, they don't need the permission from the governor. Excuse me. So the recent overrides include this year, which was the 2023 Women's Bill of Rights, and that bans any identification of gender other than the gender assigned at birth in the state of Kansas, despite federal recognition of transgender people. So basically, in July, the law is going to be in the state of Kansas, there will be a recognition of transgender people. And that was vetoed recently. So constitutional amendments, we saw with the abortion constitutional amendment, that usually happens. And we also had some other constitutional amendments on that ballot that same year. But they go through the same process as a bill, except they must pass with 2/3 of each chamber, and the governor does not have a veto, and they must pass with the vote of the people, which is why that was on our ballot that year. And so everybody has to agree that they want this constitutional change, or not everybody, 2/3 have to agree that they want this constitutional change. The governor has no say in that, it's the say of the people. So it passes or fails based on our vote. So that was just a quick intro into advocating or into navigating the Kansas legislature and bills and committees and all that. So what happens when you have all that information? What's the next step? So this is tools and tips for effectively pushing for progress in Topeka. So when is legislative session? It's really, really imperative to have preparation and research. Most legislators do not have personal staff to research issues. The more prepared and research you are on your issue, the more you will be a resource to them. So kind of just treat it like they know absolutely nothing about these bills and come with the most information and research that you possibly can. Learn the background on your issue. Has it been done in other states? What does that look like? How much did it cost? Was it successful? What are the pros and cons? And be prepared to overcome the cons. Be prepared to overcome any possible questions that they might ask. How does this issue affect specific legislative districts? How does it affect you or your community? Really take the time to like collect that community narrative so you have that to kind of back up what you're saying. This is how my community feels. Here are some statements that they have been saying. How does it affect the legislator in Kansas? Make yourself an expert as much as you can. And for impacted people, if you are someone who is impacted by these systems, if you are in the LGBTQIA community, if you are on SNAP, EBT, if you are an educator, you are an expert because you are impacted. You are an expert because this is your lived experience. So don't think that you need data points. Don't think that you need like a graph chart or like a pie chart. Your personal experience is your expertise. Your experience in your community, your community's experience, that is your expertise that you can bring to the table. Building relationships is also really, really important. I have a pretty good relationship with Senator Merriweather. She's really cool. But professional lobbyists usually don't bully or yell. And so if Senator Merriweather is hesitant on something or like doesn't understand something or votes the way I didn't want to, it's very easy for me to email her and be like, what was your reasoning behind this? Can you tell me why this happened? And she's very, very cool. She's understanding. And so it's easy for me to have that conversation with her. And I know in the heat of the moment, especially when it has to do with like a human rights issue, it's really, really hard to yell and get frustrated and get emotional. And I'm not going to censor your emotions or anything like that. You show up authentic and as you are. But a lot of people make themselves friends of legislators or help for resources because there is a possibility where a legislator doesn't want to work with you because they interpret that as you yelling at them, which we know we're just passionate about these issues. So even though legislators you disagree with are proud of the service and they think they are there to accomplish what they think is good. So they are there thinking that they are doing the best that they can. Every decision, every vote that they have made, they believe it is a good decision. And it says, try to understand. And it's really hard to do that, especially for me on a lot of human rights issues, try to understand and get to know what led them to serve and things like that. It's really hard for me to do that. But I kind of put it in the perspective of maybe they didn't grow up with a lot of LGBTQIA people around. Maybe I am the first trans person that they have ever met. So how can I humanize this issue? How can I let them know that what you were voting on is impacting me and my family, and this is what this looks like? And so for me, I get really passionate and I get really angry, but I try to humanize the issue. I don't really use a lot of data points. I use a lot of storytelling, and I just humanize it. These are real people that we're voting on, and this is what this looks like. I also throw in some statistics if I can, just because, but really I just come with my own personal impacted story. So share your story. Let them get to know you as a real person who cares about their community. That's the thing you two have in common. You both believe that you were doing something for your community because you both care about your community. That is your common ground. And then think long-term. This may not be the last time you lobby this issue, let alone many others. Even if you disagree, try to do so in a way that lets you continue to be credible advocate in their eyes. Sometimes it's really, really hard. Sometimes you got to turn to direct action. Sometimes things like that happen. But in the beginning, when you were building these relationships, just see where things go and then build your strategy from there. Meeting with legislators during the session. So again, this is going to be from like January to April approximately, but Call their Topeka office during hours and tell the assistant who you are. Please be nice to the committee assistant. They are the gateway to everything. Don't yell at them. They are not doing anything wrong. They are just doing their jobs. So call the committee assistant and ask for a 15-minute meeting. Most office assistants will just place you on their calendar. You'll have a time and a date. You can try to schedule by email, but they get a lot of emails, especially if they have to vote. They'll get a lot of emails from constituents telling them how to vote, so it can get kind of lost in everything. So it's better to call. Show up early, be prepared, and have information to leave behind, whether it's a leaflet, whether it's like a letter to them, whether it's statistics, whatever, or even a business card. Just have something to leave behind. Be respectful of the legislator's time. If you say you are there for 15 minutes, you are there for 15 minutes, not any minute longer. Legislative days can be unpredictable, so be flexible. That's really hard. I live in Wichita, and so if I drive to Topeka and they're just like, it's canceled, that's going to be really frustrating for me, because then I have to drive back. And so it's better to try to schedule those meetings in the beginning, so maybe January to February, because everything else it picks up. It's voting, it's veto session. So kind of follow the legislative calendar, and pick the less busiest month, because things tend to pick up the closest that we get to sine die. And then, yeah, again, be nice to the office assistant. They are the gatekeepers. They are nice people. They are just doing their jobs. Outside of session, this is where we are. This is what we need to focus on. So legislators don't have staff outside of the session or district offices. And so this is the time where you can email them to get to have a coffee or something like that. Or you can call their house number if they don't reply to your email, because their phone number is on there. Let them know who you are and why you would like to meet, and then suggest like a really neutral place, like a coffee shop in the district that you all share. This is going to be really, really important, because their job does not end when the legislative session ends. They voted on all these bills, all these impactful bills, or all these not so impactful bills, all these dangerous bills. And if your representative was someone who voted on a bill that you did not agree with, this is your time to ask why. This is your time to humanize the issue. This is the time to start advocating and holding them accountable and putting pressure on them, because just because we voted someone in doesn't mean that ends for us. Voting is one day out of a set year, but 364 days of the year, we should be organizing and we should be advocating. So during this summer break, some legislators will have like summer meetups. And so they'll have like coffee shops, or they'll work with their chamber. And they'll have like little pop-ups where you can go and you can ask them questions. Some of them don't do anything. And that's, to me, I don't like that. We should be having these conversations, especially on the way that you voted. And so again, imperative to know who your representative or your senator is, and start having those conversations and start holding them accountable. Organizing calls and emails. And so this is really during legislative session when it's time to vote. And this is where the people can have a lot of influence. So there's a bill that you like or a bill that you don't like. This is the time to email or call them. So mass outreach is generally not effective, but it can be impactful. So for me, Senator Mary Ware told me that when it's time for a vote and she gets an email saying like, vote yes on this bill or vote no, she keeps a tally of it. Whichever has the most tally, yes or no, that's the way she's going to vote, which I think is really nice, because it means you're listening to us and you're actually voting with what the constituents want. And so every time that there's like a hunger bill or something LGBTQ bill or whatever committee that she's on, I let her know, like, hey, please vote this way. She's like, will do. I'm like, thanks, Senator Ware, you're great. So personal stories are really, really impactful. Sometimes a lot of organizations will give you a template and it'll be the exact same wording, 200 identical emails. Sometimes those just go to their spam because they're just so repetitive. So that's why it's really, really important to, if you get a template, switch up the language, add your personal story, so that way it doesn't get sent to their spam folder. They don't have to be novels. You can literally just say vote no on SB 123. That's it. You don't have to pour your heart out. Especially if it's a really, really like controversial bill or really popular bill, they're going to be getting a lot of emails. And so the shorter, the better. Phone calls should be made to the Capitol office and be polite. Callers will be talking to the office assistants who are literally just doing their jobs. And outreach should come from constituents. So outreach should come from the people in that district. If you're in District 103, you should be talking to that representative. If you're in 103, you really shouldn't be in the business of District 105 because you don't know that representative, you don't know the issues in that community, that's not you. And so outreach to come from constituents, focus on that and build a relationship with those representatives in that area. Messaging, speak to the value of your audience. How is what you're advocating for a better investment than the status quo? Will it save money? That's going to be a big one for some of these bills, letting legislators know that this is going to save Kansans $1 million. They love to hear that. And how will it help the legislators' community? That's where those community narratives come really, really in handy. Data and research count, but mean more with stories with real people. It's good to have a balance if you can. And most legislators will be turned off by the direct reference to the political consequences of the issue, but can connect their dots on their own if you give them enough information. So really how I explain this is live in the dream, don't live in the nightmare. And so if it's a really, really impactful bill, don't explain it like, if you vote this way, millions of people will die. That's living in the nightmare. Instead, frame it in the dream and always stay in the dream. If you vote this way, we will see communities flourish. We will see, or if you don't vote this way, we will see communities flourish. We will see a rise in this. People will be XYZ. So always live in the dream when you are talking about these bills, because no one wants to hear the political consequences of if they do something, but they do want to know how they would be really, really impactful and beneficial to their community if they vote a certain way. Writing testimony is huge. It's my favorite thing to do because I love telling stories. I'm a big storyteller. And so this is one of my favorite quotes. Legislation is decided by those who show up. If we don't do anything, they will still make these decisions. They're making these decisions without us. And so it's imperative to be showing up at the Capitol, protesting, writing testimony, talking to your legislators, even just watching and being informed by watching the committee hearings, just participating in these systems. That's showing up, and we need more people to do that. So there are 3 types of testimony. You can do oral testimony, written testimony, or virtual testimony. For oral testimony, should be short, no longer than 3 to 5 minutes, and it's effective when you speak from your own personal experience. As a general rule, testimony should be delivered verbally and also submitted in writing. Written testimony should be no longer than 1 page and limited to 1 bill or issue. That's just it. You should just be focusing on the bill that they are hearing that day. If you're interested in another issue, write a different testimony. Always be polite and positive and do not attack or threaten a government official. For virtual testimony, which is fairly new, arrive 10 to 15 minutes early, ensure you are in a place that has stable internet, and make sure your camera is on. And so for virtual and oral testimony, they'll tell you this in their instructions when submitting testimony. Do not read it verbatim. The key to preparing notes for public speaking lies between these 2 extremes. Notes that remind the speaker about what to say, but don't tell the speaker how to say it. So just outline the most important parts in your testimony, but don't read it word for word. Really just focus on your personal story, because if you're doing oral testimony, you still have to submit it written, so they could just read the written part. So that's why you don't have to read it word for word. Now, there are rules to submitting testimony, and if you don't do it correctly, you will not be able to testify. And it can be really, really confusing, and it might be confusing on purpose too. And so when you are submitting testimony, you're going to go to the committee that has the bill that you want to testify on. You are going to go click on House Committee of Education. You're going to click on Committee Documents, and then you're going to go to Conferee Guidelines. So those are the instructions for us on how to submit testimony, where to submit it, how many copies, and things like that. So it's not all going to be the same. Different committees will have different rules. Some committees are paperless, and so it'll tell you like an electronic copy of a written testimony in a PDF format should be emailed. Pay attention to those, but it'll also say, we also need 75 copies. Pay attention to that too. So it'll have information on who you need to send it to. We know that we need to send it to Deborah. And we need to do it 24 hours prior to the hearing day and time. We need to provide written testimony as well, at least 24 hours. And this is how you're going to submit it via WebEx. Or if you are testifying via WebEx, they will send you a link, but you need to tell them in advance how many copies, and things like that. And then you'll see number 5, conferees should not read their testimony. A lot of them will say that. And again, every committee will have different rules. It's really, really imperative to know how to submit it, because if you don't do it correctly, you will not be testifying. So prepare days in advance if you can. Sometimes bills will be like, hey, we have a hearing tomorrow. Who knows? It's very fluid. But if you know the date of your hearing, of the hearing or the public hearing, start working on this as soon as possible. So that way you don't have to wait 24 hours, because again, some of this can be a lot. How to write testimony. There are a lot of resources online, but it's usually going to be the same. Chair or House or Senate, you're going to address them by that. You're going to address the committee as a whole. You're going to have the date, the name, and things like that. The big things that you need to specify is that if you are in support or opposition of a bill, you're going to introduce yourself, or if you're working with an organization, you're going to introduce an organization. You're going to state your position. I am in favor. I am neutral. I am testifying against. Tell your personal story. That's going to be the content, the body of your information. Start with facts, figures, your experiences, your narrative, and then you're going to close. Restate your remarks and your position. The day of the hearing, arrive early, sign up. If there's a microphone, speak directly into it. If there is a speaker who said basically the same things as you, don't repeat that. If all the points you wanted to make have been made already, tell the committee that you agree with the testimony given by the person before you and urge them to take appropriate action. Basically that. Answer only those questions that you can answer correctly. So if there is a question that you do not have the answer to, offer to find the answers to other questions and tell them that you'll get back to them as soon as you can. Don't pretend that you know all the answers. It's perfectly okay that you don't know anything. Just say, I don't know the answer to that, but I will get back to you on that. Don't make up anything. And do not argue with the members of the committee or with people giving opposing testimony, which again can be really, really hard when it's an issue on human rights, because there will be opposing people with testimony who are testifying with wrong stories or stories that don't make sense or false data or dog whistles or any of that. It's going to be really, really hard. But again, don't give them your power. Don't allow them to get you out of your moment, out of your place. Don't allow them to get you kicked out. Don't let them hold that kind of power over you. And then getting involved in the LGBTQ community. And so there's so many organizations across the state where you can learn how to help, support, and empower our youth across Kansas. And so there's Equality Kansas. Their mission is to end discrimination based on sexual orientation and gender identity. They work towards their mission through education, public policy, advocacy, and political education. So they might have legislative advocacy days where they take a day during legislative session and they get all allies and LGBTQIA people to Topeka to lobby, to talk to legislators. If they don't, that's a perfect time where you can get involved and you can create a day like that. Loud Light does a lot of work on bills that represent the people, whether it's abortion or LGBTQIA or anything like that. And I really love the work that they do. So Loud Light engages, educates, and empowers individuals from underrepresented populations to build community power that has an impact on decision makers. And so they transform Kansas through voter registration, informative videos, coalition building, civic engagement, and youth voter turnout. So if you're a young person wanting to get involved, if you're a young person who needs representation in more rural areas, that's the opportunity for you. GLSEN, there's a Kansas chapter, and their chapter supports students and educators locally, organizes around LGBTQ affirming public policy, plans teacher trainings, and hosts events for students, educators, parents, and allies. And then we have the LGBTQ Foundation of Kansas, and they are committed to helping LGBTQ people in Kansas find resources, discover community, and thrive in their identities. And they have on their website, I don't know if they have like the sign up for it, but they have an event for gender marker and gender name change in Southwest Kansas, because there are queer people in rural Kansas too. And we know that in July, the Kansas government is not going to recognize transgender people. And so if you are someone who wants to change your gender identity marker on your driver's license, your birth certificate, that is going to be a workshop for you. Yeah, that's about it. And you can find that on the LGBTQ Foundation of Kansas website or any of these websites if you have any questions. And that's about it.
All right, thank you so much, Tajahnaé. And sorry. Thank you to all who tuned in and our partners at the Independence Public Library and our funding sources, the Independence Area Community Chest and the American Library Association. Thank you again to Tajahnaé Stocker for a wonderful presentation. If you would like to continue the conversation with Tajahnaé on Zoom, follow the link in the comments. Be sure to tune in next month for our Q&A talks. We are still working on booking our June speaker, but hopefully we'll get that announced very soon. If you'd like to find out more about Project Q&A, our work, or to view past Q&A talks, visit our website and follow us on social media. To support the work we are doing in rural communities, please consider making a tax-deductible donation today. Thank you for watching our Q&A talk this month. If you have any questions for our presenter, follow the link in the comments. Thank you and have a wonderful evening.